Hey everyone, welcome back to But Why Though. I'm Kate, and today But Why Though is reviewing Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Today I'm here with the lovely Brian Shea.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me, Kate.
I am so excited to talk Sonic with you because you're the person I went to the Sonic Cafe with in San Diego earlier this year. I knew this had to happen.
Yeah, I led us on kind of a pilgrimage across downtown San Diego, like a caravan
It
of.
was a group of like what, 10 people?
It started out with just like me, you, and like two other people. And then, like, as we were talking, people were like, "What are you guys doing after this? What are you guys doing?" And it just like snowballed into like, it ended up being like 15 or 20 people, I feel
Yeah.
like. But it was just originally like a group of four and it exploded. And I was happy to have all of them. It was just like, wow, I did not expect this to be like me leading people across the city to find this Sonic cafe that was tucked away in like around a corner.
I think that speaks to the love that people have of Sonic. Um, Which brings us to this third movie. So I'm going to go ahead and give us the official synopsis. I apologize, people watching this. I sound really congested and stuff because it's winter. And what is winter without getting sick? So the synopsis. Sonic the Hedgehog returns to the big screen this holiday season in his most thrilling adventure yet. Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails reunite against a powerful new adversary, Shadow, a mysterious villain with powers unlike anything they've seen before. With their abilities outmatched in every way, Team Sonic must seek out an unlikely alliance in hopes of stopping Shadow and protecting the planet. So, Brian, what were your expectations for this film?
I I've had an escalating level of expectation for each subsequent release in the Sonic franchise, and I think that's safe to say for this as well. I went into Sonic 1 being like, okay, I just hope it's fun. Like they redid
Yeah.
the character model and I was so happy about that because like I legitimately remember being so sad when that first Sonic 1 trailer hit and it was the ugly Sonic as it's been
The teeth?
deemed now. Yeah, because I like dreamt when I was a kid, I literally had a dream that there was a live action Sonic movie. And like, 2020 was a different era or I guess it was 2019 when the trailer hit for the
Hmm.
Sonic franchise than it is now. Now it's on like a bit of an upswing. But back then it was just like, okay, we got Sonic Mania, which was great, but then like Sonic Forces, and then like we've gotten some other like not so great releases in recent memory at that point. And I remember being like, okay, maybe the Sonic movie will be good. And they released the trailer, and I remember being so sad all day because I was like, I'm like a diehard lifelong Sonic fan, and we just can't have a win, can we? That's like the attitude I had with that. But then like they redid the model, and I was like, okay, maybe they're taking this seriously. And it turned out to be like it blew past all my expectations. It wasn't like unbelievable, but it was like, one of my favorite video game adaptations as of
Yeah.
2020. And then a couple years later, we got Sonic 2, and I went in being like, okay, cool. They have Knuckles and Tails. This is great. So like I had higher expectations, and I would say it even surpassed those for the most part. And then I was hoping like, oh, well, it seems like they learned their lessons with like, let's send the humans to Hawaii and then just focus on Sonic and Tails and Knuckles and Eggman. And then they did the Knuckles show, which sent Knuckles anywhere but on screen for a long periods of time. But I enjoyed parts of the Knuckles show, but it kind of like brought me back down to earth. So I was
Yeah.
still thinking that Sonic 3 would be better than Sonic 2, but I was a little bit tempered after
Hmm.
what the Knuckles show was like because I was like, oh, maybe they didn't learn all those lessons that I thought they learned with Sonic 2. And then going into Sonic 3, I was thinking it was going to be a better, maybe the best movie in this series so far.
Yeah. I think I was very similar. So my husband loves Sonic a lot, which is something I didn't know until the first movie came out, and he made us go watch it at like the 2 p.m. showing the very first day it came out. And I was like, oh wow. And I had a lot of fun with it. It was joyous, and I think that that's something, especially as the world, is waves hands at fire, you kind of just need that joy. And I got that in the second movie, especially because I was very apprehensive of Idris Elba as Knuckles and some of like these larger, I don't want to call it stunt casting, but more so just like not traditional voice actors coming in to play roles of iconic characters.
Mhm.
And he blew me away. And then I got apprehensive again with Shadow because I was like, I don't know if Keanu has it. I love Keanu with all my heart, but I don't know. but I at least knew I was going to go in and get something that was fun and
Hmm.
had a lot of reverence for what the property has come to mean for people. Which I think brings us into talking about like what we liked about the film. To kick it off, I feel like Paramount and Sega are one of the few people who are kind of dialed in on what audiences are coming to see the movie. That was my first takeaway. What was kind of what's your first thing that you really vibed with?
I think that it continued the series tradition of, adapting these storylines and adapting these characters in ways that are they range anywhere from being acceptable to the fans to being like dead on. The fans are losing their minds. This is amazing, while also retaining the incredible level of heart that
Yeah.
even the Knuckles series, which I wasn't like blown away by, it had a lot of heart and a lot of like really heartfelt moments. And those were the times where it was at its best. And I think that Sonic 3 carried that forward. There was one scene in particular that I was like tearing up at because like it's just like I'm watching two animated hedgehogs like talking on in the weirdest setting possible, and I'm just like, oh, I'm like kind of feeling a certain kind of way right now. So I think that was my biggest takeaway, was that it was fun but also retained all of its heart and the authenticity that has led fans to appreciate this series so much.
Yeah, actually, like that scene you're talking about, without saying exactly what it is, it kind of culminates the entire movie's message, like in
Hmm.
that moment in the third act. And it was one of those moments that while I was watching, I was like, I'm watching as an adult. And there were some moments throughout like the rest of the film, I was like, oh, this is like maybe a little bit too much exposition. But when that scene happened, I was like, oh no. Like this is a movie that I've been welcomed into as an adult, but this is a movie that actually is a very strong takeaway for the children in the theater watching this right now, which I
Hmm.
have kind of struggled with when it comes to a lot of these older properties getting adapted to audiences that were with it when it first came out, but also for their children. And I don't think that there have been many that really kind of walked that line. I think Sonic has consistently done that. And I think Sonic 3, one of the elements that I really loved of it was that Donut King or whatever his James
Donut
Marsden's
Lord.
characters, Donut Lord, um, he calls them the boys, like though
Yeah.
they're effectively their parents, and it recontextualizes who Team Sonic are and ultimately who Shadow is too. Like Shadow is still a kid, and I think when you view them in that way, it changes it in a way that I didn't know I need. Not that I needed it to, but I think works for the story that they're telling. How did you feel about that kind of balance?
I did love that they have fully like leaned into the fact that like I guess Tom and Maddie
Hmm.
are Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles' adoptive parents. And I think that they did a really great job with, the recontextualization that people can have with a traumatic event or a
Yeah,
just a like a trauma response, right? Where it's
yeah.
like, here are two characters who have taken divergent approaches to dealing with their past trauma. And,
Hmm.
that's even painted in the trailer where Tom is talking to Sonic and he's like, hey, you've gone through so much and you never changed who you are in here. And, there's
Hmm.
a very funny line of like, in my lungs. But no, but like it's very true that like, it does a great job of explaining that yes, maybe your response to having this horrible thing happen to you and your family is to just go on like this anger fueled revenge tour, but maybe you can just like, make a change in a more positive light. And, there are definitely different ways you can approach and respond to trauma. And I love that they did take that approach where it not only was appealing and authentic to the characters for the people who, like us, who played these games back when they came out, like when Sonic Adventure 2 came out on Dreamcast, but it also appeals to kids who are coming to the theater and seeing this with their parents.
Yeah, and I think that that was like one of the fascinating things that I think this franchise continues to do. Is there are elements, whether it's story or like actual game mechanics that they work into the different action sequences. I wanted to pick your brain. Like, how do you think the film has adapted, I would say, pretty iconic things from the Sonic like games franchise. Like,
Hmm.
yeah. I don't know if that made sense.
No, it does. It has done a good job of like they're like little Easter eggs here and there, right? Like early on, Sonic, and very minor spoiler here, not for the story at all, just a minor Easter egg spoiler where he is running against Knuckles and Tails like in a race, and he runs past a signpost and it spins, and then like they play like the end of the level, like Sonic has completed the level, Sonic has finished act
Mhm.
one, like jingle. And it was like, oh, that's cool, like that's like a little like nod, but also for people who've never played Sonic and just are seeing the movie, they're like, oh, that jingle sounds triumphant, okay, that's fun.
Yeah.
And like, there are little nods and just acknowledgments to the source material scattered throughout, and I think that was something that the first movie, while I do like the first movie quite a bit, I just rewatched the series in the lead up to this release. I do think that it didn't rely enough on the game
Hmm.
mechanics and like the very specific references to the games. And then Sonic 2, they started kind of leaning more into that. And Sonic 3, I think they leaned wholeheartedly into it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great
Um,
thing. It's awesome that they're doing it.
and now I need to ask the big question. I know it
Okay.
is like picking your favorite child, but who is your favorite anthropomorphic character?
I mean, Sonic is like the easy answer because, like, I've been with him the longest, which is funny to say. But, like, I got into the series before Knuckles even existed.
Yeah.
So, like, I think Knuckles is probably my favorite character in, like, the Sonic universe. But, like, it's also hard
Yeah.
not to pick Sonic. And then Tails is great. But, I think Knuckles has got to be my answer.
Yeah, so funny thing is I've never been a huge Knuckles fan. And then I actually think Idris Elba's Knuckles has really floored me, and like the
Hmm.
characterization, like, and I've gone back and I've played some of the Sonic games since, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I do love Knuckles. I do think
Hmm.
he's kind of taken the cake for me. And I think like in this film, I also think Knuckles kind of shines because there's this, I don't want to say it's a mini arc. I think it's almost, it does what I like with characters that recur in franchises where they don't regress just to prove a point.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of moments throughout the film where Knuckles is, his a million times, muscle self and is just very like pow pow. But you see like in every moment that there's a little bit of softness to it where he is thinking about his family and he is thinking about Tails and Sonic up until his choice at the end. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that that is something that is very thoughtful when it comes to, okay, we can't just keep showing these characters as gimmicks or one-liners. They all have kind of full-bodied realizations that I think is really nice to see for CG characters, which I don't think always get that. I don't know. How do you feel how the characters have been?
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed that scene that you're talking about where he had to make a choice and, with involving Sonic. And I thought that was a great display of, he's gone from like this like hardened echidna warrior slash somewhat of a himbo to like, okay, well now he's like actually has some depth. And
Hmm.
I don't know that like watching the Knuckles series is essential, but if you do watch the Knuckles series, it gives some more context to that, which I thought was really great. But, I think that overall, I love the dynamic that Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails have in these movies. The big problem I had with it in this film in particular,
Hmm.
while I love the characterization of Knuckles in particular, I felt that Tails and Knuckles were kind of not given a ton to do in this movie.
Yeah, that's fair.
Um, but I did like when they did have stuff to do, I thought they were great.
Yeah, which I think like if we kind of shift into things that we think the film could have done better, I that is one of mine. Specifically because I feel like Robotnik probably gets a lot more screen time than Robotnik needed.
100%. I like look, I adore Jim Carrey. Like two of my three favorite movies of all time star Jim Carrey. And it's like and one of them is as a dramatic actor, right? So it's not just like,
Yeah.
oh, like I like when he's acting like an idiot on screen, which I do because another one is a comedy. But like I think that there were times where they needed to stick with a scene and then they were like, oh, instead we're going to cut away to this comic relief scene starring Jim
Yeah.
Carrey as Dr. Robotniks. And it was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, it's good that we have Gerald Robotnik in this Sonic cinematic universe. And obviously I want Jim Carrey to play Dr. Ivo Robotnik for as long as he possibly can or as long as he
Yeah.
wants to. I know there were talks of retirement after Sonic 2, so I'm happy that he came back. It would be weird not having him in this movie. But there were several times where I was just like, why are we cutting to them again? Like, I want to stay in this cool moment that is happening.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And I think so to your point about the comments about him possibly leaving, it was because he did not want to play bad guys anymore.
Mm,
And I think a lot of the problems that this film has, and you kind of see it in the trailer and everything, like there is a concerted effort to give Robotnik a redemption arc throughout the film that I feel like it was shoehorned in and it takes away from a lot of the depth that we could have been getting. Because when Team Sonic goes on screen, the film is at its strongest. And
oh
I
yeah.
do think, like, we haven't even talked about Shadow in like the Shadow movie. And I think that that's also one of the flaws for me because we have too much Robotnik. And I think Keanu's turn as Shadow and the moments that we have with him and the rest of Team Sonic are really good, but we need more.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how you feel.
I think that they found the right balance of Team Sonic being on screen and like the side character humans being on screen.
Hmm.
But yes, it was a little out of whack with all the screen time that they gave Robotnik. And, maybe this is the last time we see Jim Carrey in that role. And if that's the case, then it is going to kind of be like, oh, well, I get it because he's like never coming back or whatever. Like maybe he
Hmm.
retires again after this one. Like I don't think he's put out a statement saying whether or not like he is done for
Yeah.
good now. But, yeah, it did feel a little out of whack, especially at one particular moment, near the end of the movie where I'm just like, all right, enough.
Was it the dance sequence?
No, it was after
Oh,
that.
okay, okay. So how do you feel about Shadow of it all? Like, how do you think Shadow was handled? What are your thoughts?
Going in, I almost slipped this into my expectations response, but I knew we would talk about Shadow, so it's all
Yeah,
good. When they were like rumoring who was going to be who was going to be cast as Shadow, there were the rumors of Hayden Christensen and Keanu Reeves. And I thought either of those castings would be perfect for that
yeah.
because like I think both of those voices would be phenomenal. I'm so glad that we got Keanu now that I've seen the movie. I think he
Hmm.
handled it really well. I, as much as I love Hayden Christensen, I also think that he's not the best at the more like tender moments. Like he could
Hmm.
have done the rage-filled moments. We've seen him do that. And maybe he has gained some depth as a more like tender, dramatic actor than he had when he was,
Yeah,
a young guy in the Star Wars prequels and,
yeah.
Jumper. But I those are the only Hayden Christensen movies I've seen is the Star Wars stuff and Jumper. So that's all the only point of reference I have.
Oh my God.
Um but yeah, I mean, I think he brought the chops to play the hedgehog that we all love from the Sonic game series, but also deliver the more tender moments
Yeah,
that were required for some of the scenes that we got in this movie.
yeah. No, I completely agree. I feel like the interesting thing is with each of the character or each of the actors. So Ben Schwartz, I don't know the actress actually who plays Tails.
Colleen
Like I don't.
O'Shaughnessey.
Okay, I don't know her other work. Um,
She's Tails in the video games.
that she. Oh, there we go. Okay, well
That's her
that's why
work.
she's perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
well that was perfect casting. But like Ben Schwartz, I find Ben Schwartz so deeply annoying whenever I see him in anything because of his Perks and Rec role.
John
Um,
Ralphio.
yes. And Idris Elba, as much as I love him so much, and I do know he has comedy chops, sometimes the roles that he have been casted in haven't allowed him to show that depth. And I also think Keanu as well, he is very much like the silent type in films outside of he has a pretty robust filmography, and I do think he does have that depth, like you said, where I don't know if Hayden Christensen has as much. But what was surprising to me is that I think each of the actors as their hedgehog echidna counterparts have depth to them, like genuine sides to them as actors I have not seen that I really do appreciate.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that that really shines, like kind of like you said, like with Keanu as Shadow. Like I actually don't know if I can think of anybody else as Shadow now.
Hmm.
Um,
And also, Shadow is written perfectly. Like the lines that he said,
yes.
that I was like, yeah, that's what Shadow would say in that situation.
He's just annoyed. He's just a little annoyed boy, and I'm like, I get it. I feel you.
He's just like like every time Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails get in his way, he just acts like they're just this inconvenience. He's just like, come on, guys, again.
Why are you here? Did I not just kick your butt? Um, so I think overall, like as we kind of like walk away from like looking at the film, do you have any final thoughts that you think really kind of summarize like your takeaway from it?
I think this is the best movie in the series. I think
Hmm.
that, it shows that Jeff Fowler, the director, has experience with Shadow. Like you know that
Yeah.
he was the like one of the CG artists for the Shadow the Hedgehog game. So
I
yeah,
didn't
that
know that.
that was his
Oh
introduction to the
my
series.
God.
Yeah, as he worked at Blur Studios doing the cutscenes for
Wow.
Shadow the Hedgehog. And so he has experience with the character. I mean, that was,
Yeah.
where he got his foot in the door with Sega. And it shows that he has a really comprehensive understanding of what Shadow does, who he is, how he
Hmm.
would act in certain situations. Even though, like, I don't know how many people are really going to bat for the Shadow the Hedgehog game, but it's like, it's still important because that's early on in the character's existence. That's what, 3 years after he was introduced in Sonic
Yeah.
Adventure 2. And Jeff Fowler played a role in kind of shaping that character and through those cutscenes. And it was great to see a lot of the Shadow the Hedgehog references pop up, like from the game Shadow the Hedgehog, pop up
Yeah.
in Sonic the Hedgehog 3, like, him cocking a gun and then him riding a motorcycle. Like, that's great. Like having all that stuff. They even recreated the infamous scene where it looked like in the cutscene of the game, like that Shadow just killed Sonic with his gun. And
Yeah.
they just made I mean, they obviously made it so, like, he beat up Sonic. He didn't actually shoot him, but it was great to see all that. And I think that this is the best entry in the Sonic film franchise. I would put, like, one and two could be interchangeable. I think, I mean, sorry, two and three could be interchangeable. One
Yeah.
is pretty clearly the weakest for me, even though I still like
Yeah.
it quite a bit. But I'd probably put it like, a quarter point on a like a 10-point scale above Sonic 2.
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah, I think for me, I think the second one is still my favorite, only because I think it found that balance across every vector and the Robotnik stuff. Like so I compared it very specifically to when Jim Carrey is let to just be Jim Carrey, like without an editor or somebody pulling him back. That's not the best Jim Carrey. Sometimes he overwhelms what he's in to a point that you lose pieces. So I think that this is less than for me. But what I do think that this movie does is, oh my God, I'm gonna sneeze. Of course, I'm gonna sneeze when I talk. Of
Bless you.
course. Thank you. What I do think this movie does is it gets me extremely excited for more Sonic. And
Mhm.
as somebody who is so like just bored to death with sequels and everything that we're getting in the franchises that are coming out. The fact that I left that with that end credit scene, so excited. and
Yes.
just ready for more. I think it proves, and I think taking on Shadow for me proves that this is a franchise that has legs, and it has legs not in spite of its video game roots or franchise, but because of it and an
Mhm.
understanding of it that it's bringing to the forefront. And so, even with my issues with it, I still think it's incredibly strong.
Yes. And they did give us the announcement that Sonic the Hedgehog 4 is scheduled for a 2027 release. So,
Yep.
probably at least 2.5 years probably between now and when we get our next Sonic movie. Do you think we get another character focused series on Paramount Plus?
I think we do.
I
I definitely think we do.
I would think that a Shadow series would be a home run.
Yes, 100%. My hope is that the critic reviews from Knuckles makes them realize that they should invest more in budget to have Shadow and or anybody else they choose to put in it. It's got to be Shadow. Um, they give them the budget to make sure that they keep using him because that's how I think that it can. Because the Knuckles series had the potential to be something very great. I just think the costs of special effects and CG are very high,
And
and the
Idris Elba.
Idris Elba, you're not wrong, and I'm very certain Keanu is probably a little bit more than that if we're honest. So I hope that it they give it what it needs to have success.
Hmm.
But I definitely think we're getting something. There has to be something because there's already like
Yeah.
the 3D animated series that keep popping up on Netflix as well. So I feel like the TV division for Sega specifically is ramping up.
Hmm. So, how would you rank the post-credit scene? And I'm assuming we're not doing too much in way of
Mm.
spoilers here, but how would you rank this post-credit scene against the ones that we got in Sonic 1 and 2?
Ooh, she's my girl. So high, absolute high, like kicking my feet in my seat, theater excitement. My husband looking over at me, being like yes. Yeah, no, I have this as my highest of them. Yeah,
I was very stoked about it. The scene itself was very cool as well.
it was.
I was like, are we getting like a full extra scene here? Like this isn't just like a little stinger? Like, because you remember like the stinger that we got at the end
Yeah,
of Sonic 2 was, the reveal of Shadow, and they're just like, oh yeah, there's this project from like, 50 years ago. What is this? Oh, we
yeah.
found
Here's a
Project
tube.
Shadow. And then
Yeah,
yeah, a tube of shadow in it and he wakes up a little bit. And it's like, okay, that's it. But this was like a full on interaction, and there were, two character reveals. So that was pretty
there
great.
was.
I would say that I think maybe like in terms of like the reveal and the tease of what's next, I want to say that 2 was a little bit bigger for me just because I love
That's fair.
Shadow. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to deny the excitement that came after seeing the post-credit scene of Sonic 3. And the people next to me, they were maybe the biggest Sonic the Hedgehog fans I've ever encountered in real life. And I will say that the scream that they let out, the best way to describe it is guttural. Like they were like screaming with their whole chests when that happened.
That is amazing. And I think so. I think that like if I had to quantify other than like my pure pink bias, because I think it genuinely is because there was so much packed into that one scene
Hmm.
where it was like, oh no, they're not stopping. And I think that that was why I was extremely excited because it was like they're gonna run. Um, yeah.
Honestly, that was I thought that was going to be the end of Sonic 2, the one that we got the cutscene of Sonic or the
Oh,
post-credit scene of Sonic 3.
really?
I thought they flip-flopped. Like I thought they were going to go to that before they went to Shadow. But turns out I was wrong. So it's going
Huh.
to be interesting to see how
Yeah.
this ever because I think as we talked about earlier, they sometimes struggled with the screen balance.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think they got the balance right with the actual like CG main characters. But as this
Yeah.
roster continues expanding, we saw that like, Knuckles and Tails, while they had great moments, were kind of relegated to background while Sonic and Shadow stepped into the true spotlight of the
Hmm.
story. With these extra characters that are coming into the fray through the post-credit scene for Sonic 4, how is that balance going to continue to be
Oh,
shifting?
yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair that's a fair question to have going into things.
Because that's always been
I
like the
hadn't thought
thing.
about that.
Yeah, that's been the problem that a lot of the games have had is as the roster
Yeah,
continues expanding, how do you manage all these characters? And the answer has always been like, well, unless we relegate a whole bunch of them just to like background characters and
yeah,
focus on like these 3 or 4 characters that we really want to focus on, it gets messy real quick. And
yeah,
one thing that this movie was like, I always say like the like one of the worst things that a movie can be is boring. But like so like
yeah,
if I go to a movie and it's like masterfully made and I'm like, "Oh my God, like this is an expert filmmaker that made this movie and the actors are incredible." But this movie and the story and the everything is so painfully boring. I'm gonna walk out of that being like, "Oh, they were good at what they did, but like
yeah.
the movie was really boring. I don't ever want to watch that again."
I
This has the opposite problem almost,
yeah.
where it's like it's so much damn fun. It's like one of the most fun movies I've seen in a while, but
Hmm.
it's sloppy as hell in some places,
In
not
some
throughout.
places, no, but you're not wrong. And I think I think that that is going to be a concerted that is going to be something they're going to have to put a concerted effort into balancing because you're 100% right. I like to say there are movies that are it's a technically good movie. The cinematography is on point, the
Mm.
cast is on point, the costuming is banging.
Oh my
I'm
God,
not
yeah, it
gonna
is.
watch it again because it's boring. And no, when you're talking about those, and then
Yeah.
like the fun movies, this one, it's like it's fun, even if I think a lot of the Robotnik stuff is messy as hell. It's so good because the CG is on point, the CGI is on point, and the action set pieces are on point. Maybe some of the lines are iffy, but they always come back to giving me something good and giving me something fun and grabbing me and pulling me in.
Hmm.
And I do worry how they keep it all in play. I didn't think about that until because I mean, either they're sending some people off to Hawaii or they're going to deal with an all CG cast, which I think is going to be an interesting concept in and of itself.
I mean, I still think the end game is eventually taking them back to Sonic's world. And
Yeah,
that's how they trim the cast down quite a bit. But then it's like, all right, well, what are we even doing here? Because like so much of the story has been like these characters coming into Earth.
yeah.
I'm still waiting for the day that we get my boy Chaos in the Sonic movie series. Every single time I go into a post-credit scene, I'm crossing my fingers.
Well, Brian, why don't you tell everybody who's watching this where they can find you?
Sure, you can find me on Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram at Brian P. Shea, and then you can find the All Things Nintendo podcast wherever you get your podcasts. There's also a video version on YouTube, and then I have a Patreon that you can search All Things Nintendo or go to patreon.com/ Brian Shea Podcasts.
Yay. Oh, and I forgot to ask, should people go see Sonic 3 this holiday weekend?
Oh yeah, it's so much fun. If you saw the first two and you're like, I really enjoyed those, go see Sonic 3 because you will really enjoy this as well.
Awesome. And I'm Kate. You can find me at all my work at butwhytho.net, and you can find us at butwhytho.net on Blue Sky and butwhytho PC everywhere else. If you like what we're doing, support us. Go to butwhytho.net/support and subscribe to our newsletter, butwhytho.net/newsletter. Yeah, I'm really bad at closing these things because we're YouTubers now, but also like, subscribe, do the things. Let's all go watch Sonic 3.
I want to go see it again.